Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Latte on Cloud Cost, the podcast that guides you through the complex world of cloud cost optimization. I'm your host, Trini Chandra, and every 2 weeks, we deep dive into strategies, tools, and best practices that helps FinOps professional, engineering leaders, and DevOps teams like yours to navigate the financial aspects of cloud computing. This episode is very special for two things. First of all, it's 10th episode. Second, I'm in this historical city of Rome, right? And we have a very special guest as well, Pathik Sharma. Hi, Pathik. Welcome to the show.
Hello, Pranit. I am glad to be on the show.
Yeah, great. So just let me give you a small intro. I think, Pathik, I might not do justice. So you feel free to stop me and tell, like, dude, I have also done this, right? So that's what I would like. So Pathik leads cost optimization, Google's professional services FinOps practice. Now, when I say Pathik has seen it all in cloud cost world, I mean it. He's worked hands-on with hundreds of different customers and partners, helping them navigate everything from setting up from governance framework to building out elusive cost conscious culture that we all talk about and always feel that it's difficult to set it up. And you might know Pathik very well, right? From his viral FinOps sketch notes that have simplified complex concepts for thousands. I totally love that, right? I love those sketch, and the amount of effort that goes into doing it is just great, right? And you might have also seen him on stage with Google Cloud Nest, FinOps X, and Forbes articles. He's also deeply embedded in the FinOps Foundation community, constantly sharing real-world stories and leading practices. So, Pathik, once again, welcome to the show. It's great to have you today.
Yeah, thanks, Pranit, for this wonderful introduction. I think you have done justice all right. And I'm glad to be on this show and happy to dive deep into the fun world of FinOps.
Great. Rightly said, it's a fun world, right? We just closed on FinOps at San Diego, right? I think I was hearing a lot of great reviews about the conference this year and all the different things that I think it has been maturing, right? And I think that takes me to my first topic today, the FinOps evolution at a scale. I think you have seen FinOps maturity across thousands of customers, right? But what's in your mind is the biggest shift that you have observed in organization approaching cloud cost optimization in 2025 compared to when FinOps was emerging, right? What's your learning on that front?
Yeah, I think this question is very timely. And as you mentioned, we just wrapped up FinOps X last week, and this is all very fresh in the mind. And in fact, I was fortunate to be able to attend all four of them. And I now have 3 foxes. I don't know if you can see on the video, but
Can't see that, but yeah.
so I'm a big collecting fan of the foxes. I hope I'll be able to go to the next ones as well, and then keep going that collection. But I think coming back to your question, right? I think it's fascinating to look back on how FinOps has grown overall. I personally feel it has evolved a great deal in the last 6-ish years. And I also feel that it's still the same. So then it was just starting, FinOps wasn't even on most people's radar. You would only really think about FinOps if you hit a wall, right? In this case, the budget wall. Like, oops, we ran out of money. How did that happen? And then it was all about the basics, right? How do we cut cost? How do we get more visibility? And fundamentally, we were trying to answer that one question: what are we spending on? So, oftentimes I hear customers are like getting that final detailed build, not understanding how that works, the uses, the consumptions, the hundreds of thousands of SKUs, and then scrambling for coupons to like, okay, can we save a few bucks here and there, right? So it was no framework, not much help from other people. You were supposed to create practices that you think were best. And, I think that's the time when people started digging deep into, hey, if we were to cost, we need to understand the cost. And if we want to understand the cost, we need to go with the basics like resource hierarchy. How do we organize our costs, like tags and labels? And, while folks are trying to do that, this is like just so much, easier if we would have done this upfront, right? So like it was mostly about build in the cloud, and then we'll worry about the optimization, right? So FinOps was very much an afterthought to now, when you fast forward it to 2024 and now 2025, right? The conversation has really matured. So, especially when I see customers moving to another cloud, they want to get it right. right? They have seen things fail, things not work, and they are being proactive. They fully grasp and understand what FinOps is. They have dedicated FinOps practices leading the strategy and execution. If you talk about tooling, right? Back in the days, you can count the number of FinOps tooling that were out there in your hands, but now it's hundreds of them. And they are also specializing in your needs, right? Do you need to optimize your containers? We have tool. I also found a partner. Do you need insurance on your community's discounts? We've got you covered, right? So I think that tool spectrum has gone widespread. And then from a community perspective and health perspective, right? You often hear JR from FinOps Foundation say there's like,
Yeah.
they started with 21 people on the first call discussing about FinOps challenges and learning from each other to now at FinOps X last week, they shared more than 85,000 practitioners, right?
Wow.
Actively having this conversation. So, and it's all moving from cost optimization to value optimization, right? What's my business value from the spend that I have in cloud versus, it used to be, what are we spending, right? So now the transition has been, why we are spending what we are spending. So I think that's fantastic. And then I mentioned it's still the same, right? Because, you go back to what's the top thing that FinOps practitioners are worried about, and guess what it is? Getting rid of waste, right? It's still the cost optimization. It's still one of those things. And I think if you plug in AI into this whole space, right? The FinOps for AI is, again, going back to the cloud world, it's very new. People are still trying to understand how it works and what's the value it provides to our customers and so on and so forth, right? So I think, Pranit, there is much more sponsorship now from leaders. There's much more attention now. People understand that if you don't do FinOps right, you are missing out on the strategic advantage to maximize your cloud value. But at the same time, there is also a lot more to learn.
Exactly. I think I could say like 100 times yes, yes, and more of yes, right? But like, I think this whole thing around like getting rid of waste, right? I think the definition of waste has changed over the years, right? Like earlier, people used to think, I don't understand what is waste, right? I feel like everything that is not getting used is waste. Then people started understanding, okay, there will be some waste, right? Let's figure out the ROI of cloud. And I think today we are in a phase where I think people have stopped talking less about let me reduce costs. Let me try to figure out a ROI of my cloud cost. And I think that's a great move forward, right? Because if you are not doing it, you will always think like, I don't understand these 1,000 SKUs, what they are about, and how do I solve it, right? I think,
absolutely,
yeah, the evolution is great.
And to the business outcome, what you're getting out of it, and companies don't mind spending more on certain things if it helps improve their customer experience. If you are providing a great developer experience to your teams and so on and so forth, right? So it's all about finding that right balance.
Exactly. And I think that is how it should be, right? Technically, that's how it is supposed to be. But I think it's all that collective learning from the 21 people on the call to 85,000 people today. I think we have very well created a industry as such, right? There was no industry, right? Yes, we were all doing cloud optimization for a very long time, but I think there was nothing called as industry. I think we have successfully created an industry in the last 4 years, and that's great, right? That's great in itself. So we talked about number one thing that people talk about is getting rid or eliminating waste, right? But I also want to talk about the number two problem that everyone talks about, right? The commitment challenge, right? And I still see a lot of companies struggle with the flexibilities and savings when it comes to RIs, commitment, use discounts, and savings plan. So how do you consult or advise organizations that are commitment shy but want to have meaningful cost reduction? Like, what's your approach to that? And I ask it to everyone because I'll tell you, I do consulting to a lot of customers and few of them go totally aggressive, like 85, 90% coverage. Few of them will be, I've got 50% covered, 50% reserved, but 3 year, I'm saving like 50, 60%, right? And when I try to understand the philosophy behind it, there's no philosophy, there's no framework. It's just like we at this point in an organization thinks this is the right way to go forward and we do it, right? But I think there might be some formula, some framework that people can learn, right? And probably that's what I'm seeking from you, right? What's the right way of balancing this long-term commitment versus like being commitment shy? There has to be a middle ground, right? How do we do it? Right. And that's my question to
Yes.
you.
I think oftentimes when I talk to the customers, they want the saving that comes with that long-term relationship and long-term commitments, right? Think about 1 year or 3 years. But then they are also terrified of being tied down, especially in this super fast-paced world where technology is evolving very rapidly, right? Think AI.
Yes.
And it's still like for most companies out there, right? This could be the single most important lever that they could be pulling to optimize their cloud spend, right? This is, again, we are not talking about just saving money, but this could have an impact on your EBITDA. This can have an
Yeah.
impact on your profit margins. And I think that's where this comes down to. And so my advice to companies who are commitment shy, to your point, is like, you don't have to get married on your first date, right? I
Yeah.
think most modern cloud commitments these days, they aren't all very rigid. They aren't all one size fits all contract. Major cloud providers, including Google Cloud, they have introduced very flexible options, right? So there used to be resource based committed use discounts, which is applying to the resources that you spin up in cloud. But now there is spend based committed use discounts, which provides, again, more flexibility to the spend that you have in cloud. And this is like, instead of thinking of this as marriage, like think about this as more of a flexible lease on an apartment, right?
Yeah.
You get a great deal, you grab an apartment. Now you also have an option if you want to move to a bigger apartment, later down you got married, you have kids, you can go to the bigger apartment in the same building or perhaps different building owned by the same company, right? So there is those flexibility that comes into the play. And practical approach that I have seen work well for the customers, and the approach that I use is plant, grow, harvest. And this is also, again, we started doing a lot of work for our raised garden beds in the backyard, and we started growing okras and tomatoes and things of those nature. So that's kind of seeping in to our FinOps conversation here as well. So
Yeah.
kind of going back to that plant, grow, harvest, right? Plant, you start small, right?
Yeah.
If you're scared about 3 years, maybe you start with 1 year. You, again, go, instead of going resource based, you go spending based, which has more flexibility and can be applied across projects, can be applied across machine families, right? So, and then you start small. The next thing that you do is grow, right? Grow as in, now you start monitoring how effective are your commitments, right? So typically this comes into what's your coverage looks like, what's your utilization looks like, and really looking at how do you monitor those. And then if your bet is successful, you double down on that, right? So you inflate your initial commitments and you buy it in tranches. So this is actually very helpful because if you buy those commitments in tranches, they also expire in tranches, right? So that allows you to move and look at that long-term flexibility as your organization evolve and the technology that you're using under the hood changes. And then the last piece is harvest, right? Harvest all the savings that you have had. When it comes times to renewal, you can turn on auto renew, or you can assess your needs and how you are consuming your resources to be able to purchase more. I think oftentimes customers are worried about committing more than 100% and feeling that there might be waste. But there is always this, start small, crawl, walk, run, right? Like that's the standard terminology that most people use in FinOps. So that's where I think things comes into play. And then I think on top of that, there are tools. These tools are fantastic, right? Like if I talk about Google Cloud, we have community use discount analysis that allows you to make those decisions, how much you have covered, how much you don't have covered, how much you could be covering and saving more, right? There is scenario modeling in place, the what if scenarios. There is also recommendations that comes directly from FinOps Hub that allows you to. And I think this also gives FinOps team the strength to be able to showcase to their leadership that, hey, because we made these commitments, this is how much we saved versus what we could have lost on the table, right? Money on the table. if we would not have acted in time, right? It's really a continuous process, and starting small, adjusting, and kind of going from there, right? So
Yeah.
that's my recommendation, right? Don't be afraid, take that first step.
And I think that's really a good point over there, right? When you talked about, right, start seeing in very small, right, doing every day. I think the kind of laddering kind of commitment, I think this is something that has picked up in last 6 months or 8 months or so. I keep on seeing people, right? People have started committing small, but they keep on laddering the commitment. And I think that works great, right? So you don't have to really go aggressive, but at the same time, be this passive conscious person, and still you can save a lot, right? That's what I'm looking at it, right, from that perspective.
100%.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, right? And since you talked about a couple of things around like doing commitments, every cloud providing it, there's one question that is coming more and more often, right, with AI and everything coming in. Should we do multi-cloud now? The reason being, okay, this particular cloud has got a very good foundation model. This particular cloud has a very good APIs on top of this, and I don't have to name all the clouds, right? But oh, this cloud has great infrastructure for running this model, right? Now, how do I look at these multi-cloud deployments, right? And first of all, like I would like to cover this in three parts, right? People think about multi-cloud strategy. Yeah, great thing to do. Let's do it, right? But what are the challenges that look around? What are the challenges that look when you think about multi-cloud strategy that people don't think about it? Second, is it always about reducing the cost when you think about multi-cloud, or is it more to that? Right. And third, that I would like, I'm sorry, I'm adding questions to on top of questions, but the third one is in this complex world where you want to have the best AI model for your application to be running, is multi-cloud a good solution? Or do you still think, right, hey, we can manage with managed services at a point, right? So that is it. Yeah.
Yeah, let's unpack. There's a lot in there. Appreciate the question. So I think the reality is that multi-cloud is here to stay, right? Most of the customers that I interact with, they are multi-cloud, right? And the reasoning that we see here is for business outcomes, right? One cloud might provide a strategic importance. There is a suitable partnership that is set up between the organizations and the cloud providers. And there is also the niche, right? Like, hey, what if I want to go global in certain regions? How can I really leverage that? And I think we have also seen companies who also build abstractions layer on top of it, right? So the underlying app team may not even know where their apps are running, right? It may be running on Google Cloud, it may be running on Azure, it may be running on AWS and others, right? And I think they are making those decisions real time to see where do I have the spot VMs available for me to run this batch workload, or based on AI models that are being running, how can I get the minimum value benchmarking that I'm trying to hit for across those multiple first-party models, third-party models, and so on and so forth. So I think we are way past the conversation of should I go multi-cloud? I think it's more along the lines of like most customers are approaching multi-cloud at this point, and I think the FinOps strategy has to address that as well, right? I think from a very basic perspective, effective multi-cloud FinOps is all about unified view of your cloud spending. So let's say if you are managing your personal finances and have accounts in 7 different banks, right? Each with their own app, own fee structure, own reporting styles, then you really have to be a financial wizard to keep track of all of that, right? Similarly, how do you think about your apps? Now, with your cloud, it's actually significantly much more complex and complicated. And when we talk about challenges, right, to coming to your other question, the challenges that we see in the industry is one, lack of single pane of glass, right? Yeah. They might have you isolated into their different clouds, but again, they all have their own sets of cost management tooling, different billing formats, different terminology. In fact, we sometimes see different teams managing different clouds from a FinOps perspective, right? And then one FinOps team thinking about it differently versus others, and so on and so forth. This can lead to inconsistent labeling, tagging, allocation, right? And again, it bubbles down into how you do forecasting and things of those nature. So that's where the challenges really lies. And now we talk about different pricing structures, right? You may have different commitments with different cloud. You have different billing models. And you cannot really be an expert in all of that, but really, how do you get everything together in terms of this complexity? So I think coming back to like, okay, so we understand the challenges. There is a wide sprawl that is happening across clouds. Now, how do we think about governance and cloud FinOps strategy, your processes and frameworks? And the way that we approach cloud FinOps is like our framework is really cloud agnostic, right? We understand this fact, we embrace the fact that customers are using multi-cloud. And we really think there has to be a central FinOps team, right? A dedicated team that is acting as a translator between these cloud providers, responsible for unified view, you're responsible for tracking commitments, responsible for making sure that there are consistent labeling, tagging, the right foundational structure that is put in place, and have that centralized governance function in place, right? Because you start thinking about policies and guardrails and so on and so forth. The next piece that comes into play here is tooling, right? There is always this native tooling that comes with native CSP, right? Google Cloud has their own tools and so have other clouds as well. But then there also comes a point where, okay, should I be leveraging focus framework, right? Which unifies your billing semantics across cloud. Should I be building my own FinOps data lake, get my data into one place, maybe put a BI tooling on top of it, right? So typically we see customers use BigQuery for their FinOps data lake, Looker for their front-end UI, and then start with reporting, right? So you have a single view, unified view from a reporting standpoint, leveraging focus framework from FinOps Foundation, and then slowly and gradually thinking about, okay, now can I enable anomaly management across clouds, right? So now I have the same models performing the same ways that I think they should be doing, looking at the applications in the context of my business context, right? And then you slowly start leveraging, forecasting, cost optimization, guardrails, and so on and so forth across clouds. This is also where we can go into a very heated debate about buy versus build, right? Do you buy off-the-shelf products that are out there, gives you the ease, works out of the box, but then you are also tied to their roadmap? Or you build something in-house which caters to your need, but then now you have a product to manage and maintain, right? And I think finding that right balance comes into play. And then the third piece I would say is like standardizing it, like standardize. It's okay to be crawling in one capability on one cloud versus walking on the other capability, right? So a classic example that I usually see is like, hey, we understand, let's say, Google Cloud Services well and the Kubernetes containers and the applications that we have there. And we really understand how to optimize that spend versus, we may not be that great at doing forecasting in Google Cloud versus when we are using other clouds, we really understand, how do we do anomaly management versus others. I think there is those break-even situations that comes into play. The other question that you fundamentally touched upon is like, hey, should customers be looking at, like, for example, AI models, right? Should I be using the best of the AI models? Like, there is no best models, right? It's all depend on what you're trying to do. Wayfair actually spoke about this at FinOps keynote, and I can share this because it's public, right? They have their own internal benchmark. This is the results that we expect from an AI model. You run it across first-party models and third-party models, and there are several that fits their size, and that's the best model for them, right? It doesn't have to be that some benchmarking that puts it out there. I think having talked about this, like, you will see that from a Google Cloud perspective, our approach and methodology is very much open from the get-go. So not only from a FinOps perspective, which is cloud agnostic, but even if you look at Vertex AI, which now hosts first-party models, so you can use Gemini's and Gemma, which is open source, but also third-party models, right? So your Anthropics and Metas, so forth, right? So again, giving that choice to the customer to be able to run the models that they want in that singular platform, right? That's essentially where it comes down to.
Yeah, I think there's also this percolation slowly that's happening. And this is a recent incident, right? I think it was like 2 weeks back. I was talking to one of the friends that got referred to another startup friend, right? And he was talking about, at which point should I think about using Llama hosted on GCP versus this vendor where I know, he's using Llama behind the scene, but He's giving me that all uptime reliability, and I do not have DevOps engineering and everything. And then the cost basis, I do not understand. I'm like, it's fine, right? At a point when you actually reach to where you cannot really understand what's happening with your costs and everything, yes, it makes a lot more sense. Go sell post model and do everything, right? You want to do. But till that time, I think, yeah, this is a easier trade off. You're getting credits. You can play with so many different MSPs and make things work, right? So I think that's interesting. That's very interesting.
Oh yeah.
I think what you talked about, this Wayfair's thing about having internal benchmark, I think I can relate to it so much because right now there's so much fluff, right? That we talk about, okay, this model, this is performing best at this industry benchmark. But what do you actually need? If you understand that, I think you will be able to figure out which is a better model, right? And that takes me back to one more thing, right? Since you touched on FinOps X, one of the things I kept reading during FinOps X is FinOps for AI, FinOps for AI. But I also read at a lot of places AI for FinOps, right?
Yeah.
And that takes me very well to what I want to ask you, right? Do you see a place, right, where AI will actually change the game for automated cost optimization, right? And do you see it as a balance where there's a human in the loop versus fully autonomous AI agents doing the job for you? Like, what do you see? Like, I know I might be asking a lot of visionary stuff at this point of time, asking you to forecast something. But yeah, would love to understand because yes, you are. I've heard about it so much right now in last 1 week after FinOps 6. Like, I want to know what actually people are thinking about it now. Yeah.
I will tell this, Pranit, the future is here, right? It's not that will AI enhance FinOps, it's actually doing it right now. We have been working with customers to deploy AI for their driver-based forecasting, right? Taking in your business drivers, taking in your historical spend patterns, taking in your migrations and new products and new features, and predicting what your forecasting is going to be to provide an input to the CFO of what the budget will be for the next year. We are already using AI for anomaly management, right? We see that it's not only just identifying, hey, you have an anomaly by doing baselining and benchmarking and automatically identifying that, but also going further by saying, here are the best practices, here are the root cause analysis, here's the change that is the reason why this anomaly was occurred. Yeah. And these are the correlated services and SKUs which generated this anomaly. Like, I'll give you an example of real world scenario, right? Where the customer was actually testing a test data set. And instead of applying test data set, they by mistake applied it to the production data set. So they ingested huge volumes of data, trained models on top of it, and then did inference. And we found that there was a anomaly correlated across BigQuery, cloud storage, networking simultaneously all at the same time, right? And then you are like, hey, this is happening because you misconfigured your data source. And I think the idea here is not only we are able to identify anomaly quicker, but we are also providing enough information for teams to rectify it, right? Yeah. So I think AI is really enhancing FinOps right now, and we are actively working on AI agents for estimating your cost. AI agents where you can ask natural language questions to create fancy charts and graphs, right? That your CFO is asking for, that your app teams is asking for, and really freeing up the FinOps time, because FinOps usually was the bottleneck that, hey, can you give me this report? And it takes time to be able to do this. And, people don't understand the SQL, people don't understand the underlying data structure. And it's, so it usually takes PhD to be able to understand and make sense of it. And AI can actually take all of that heavy lifting. And then even in terms of cost optimization, right? Like, one of the things that we announced was like predictive auto scaling, like understanding how you use your app and predicting that your app will be needing more resources. How can we auto scale and pre-warm so the customer doesn't have the latency and can really get that enriched customer experience? Now, coming back to the important question of balance, right? How much do you it's not that AI is there to take our jobs. It's more like AI is there to enhance and make our jobs better. And there is a balance between automated decision making versus human in the loop. So like it's very clear from our standpoint, right? Like what's AI role? AI's role is to analyze this massive data, identify patterns, provide recommendations, right? An example of that would be an AI, as soon as you do a pull request in GitHub, comes back and makes a comment saying that, hey, by the way, you are trying to deploy storage in Google Cloud Storage, but you forgot to put lifecycle management policy, right? Like just providing those helpful hints, helpful nudges. And I think the human's role in this case is use those recommendations, apply your business context, and make that final call, right? An example of that would be AI can come and say that, hey, that instance has not been used, shut it down. Well, we know that that instance is there for disaster recovery. We pre-warmed it up in case if there is a natural disaster. And that's okay to keep it up and running. And we can feed that context into AI by saying that, hey, that's our disaster recovery HA setup that we have going on, right? And please make these recommendations more relevant. So I think that's where AI is really powerful, is making it more relevant for me, right? We are not just talking about a company in this case. We are talking about a team within a company and getting it that specific, right? So I think that's where AI is really powerful, and we are seeing a lot of applications from our side. We are deploying it with our customers at scale. Like, for example, CME Group, which is one of the world's largest derivative exchange, they have spoken about how they are using cost anomaly and AI in their FinOps toolkit to really kind of enhance their FinOps practice.
Agreed. And I think what I'm hearing from you is, if you are a FinOps practitioner, I think you've got this part of being an analyst, you have this part of being the economist. I think you can leave all the analyst job to AI and be the economist that you want it to be. Am I correct? Am I reading it correctly? Right? Like, make the AI is not going to eat up the FinOps job. Make it the best analyst that you could ever get on your data, and you be the economist, right, who actually builds out this strategy. Because I think that's a challenge with all the FinOps practitioners I hear, right? Where are they time going, oh, I'm building some more fancy dashboards. I'm like, you could have done better. It's not a BI job, right?
This is so cool, because at FinOps X during keynote, they were mentioning how they are augmenting AI FinOps analysts into their team. And just like an analyst would go through an onboarding, training, education, the AI would go through the same process, right? Like, this is how our business works. This is what our architecture looks like.
Exactly.
And, kind of augmenting AI into the team. And I think, there is balance here, because sometimes people also think like AI is this black magic that is going to immediately solve all my problems. And then, hey, can you just apply AI and make everything good for me? Well, no, because again, foundations, right? Do you have the right data? Do you have the right tagging, labeling? Do you understand your cost? Do you have the allocation in place, right? Like, do you have the right business drivers in the mix? And do you have the semantic layer that makes sense of this data? Now that you have that, AI can actually make it much more powerful for you.
Yeah. Rightly said. I think that's so true. And that takes me to one other question that I keep hearing, right? And sorry, these are all the questions that I keep on gathering with people, and I like to hear again and again, like, okay, what are different viewpoints? Because I don't have a viewpoint, a very strong viewpoint on it, right? One of the things that I hear from a lot of CTOs, a lot of CFOs, like, I don't know why CFOs talk about it, but yeah, a lot of CTOs definitely is, hey, I want this cost conscious culture in my organization, right? That is one thread of CTOs, right? Very much mature industry. The other set of CTOs think like, hey, if I start doing this cost conscious, I'm going to stifle the innovation. I'm going to squeeze its neck, right? Or the innovation won't happen in my organization. And then to both the people, I've always been explaining, right? It's not about spending it carefully. It's about how you are spending, and do you understand where you are spending, right? What's your take on it, right? How do we drive this cost conscious culture without having to like become a bottleneck in innovation, right? I think that's a challenge, right? As soon as you start asking costs, like you just said, right? Hey, this thing you did not tag, and this is going to cost you $10. What would be the people's reaction, right? So how do we do that balance, right? What do you have suggested to people, right? I'm pretty sure tons of people might have asked you this question, and I would love to hear that.
Yeah. No, this is, again, probably this is my favorite question, especially because it touches the very heart of FinOps, right? You can have the best tools and the most sophisticated dashboards in the world, but if you don't have the right culture, you will never succeed. That's the one thing that we find it's very hard to change, right? It's the culture. And those who are doing amazingly well, who are black belt at FinOps, they have figured out a way to reverberate that culture within the organization versus others, those who get super focused on, hey, that tool can solve my problem. Well, not really. And I think getting back to this, right, like getting engineers to embrace cost consciousness, it feels a bit like teaching your kids to turn off lights when you leave the room. It doesn't mean you're stifling innovation. Well, you are actually using FinOps to your advantage for your growth, right? Because what if you're not doing FinOps? Right? You're wasting a ton of money. And especially if you're a startup, if you are backed by investors, well, they expect you to be using the resources, in this case, money judiciously, right? Versus if you are using FinOps, right, and when making sure that things are being efficient, you have those spare resources, aka money, to hire more folks in your team, to build more products and features, right, and things of those nature. And I think you can really garner that competitive advantage. Now, how do we get to that? Right now, we understand that this culture is important. How do we get to that? Well, can it be made more fun? I think going back to that electricity, right, like showing kids to turn off lights when you leave the room, you explain them the concept of electricity bill, how much you can actually save. You put those money towards fun, and then you can have a fun family weekend. You can go to Disney trip, right? Like, things of those nature. But I think teaching that culture, and that's always what's more effective, right? So when you really, like, folks often ask me, okay, how do you solve for culture? There are a few things that we have seen that works. One, make it about efficiency and not just about cost, right? The idea is not to cut costs. The idea is to be efficient, right? Engineers are naturally problem solver people. They love things to be more efficient. And if you show them that this is where the inefficiencies are, they will figure out a way to improve efficiency, to reduce waste, and come up with that well-architected application that comes into play. This is actually very interesting. One of the financial services customers we work with, the challenge was too much logging spend. I think their logging was like top 3 spend in the cloud, and the was like, should really we be spending that much? And they started looking at log exclusion and how do we control the volume. And engineers figured out an intelligent way of like, hey, we have interesting verbiage where we are capturing the entire request and entire response as a payload. We typically don't need the entire thing. We only need the metadata. So can we get rid of that? They also found that they keep using labeling in logging that comes up over and over again. And they are like, hey, labeling is great from a billing and a cost management perspective. So we keep it there. But from a logging standpoint, maybe it doesn't provide value. So can we strip that down? And right, they were able to control the volume of logs, and they shrink it down to like 70%. And I think, again, going back to that, being creative. I think one of the things that FinOps Foundation talk about is the Prius effect, like providing that real-time visibility into your consumption, and then that drives better behavior into the engineers. And then at Google, you might have heard, a bunch of folks from Google write book about SRE and how to manage, SLOs and error budgets and things of those nature. And I think pulling a thread out of that, it's like the blamelessness. How you do root cause analysis, which is more blameless. It's not about the people, it's about the process, and how do you think about really putting your arms around that. And I think that really helps from a culture standpoint. And I'll wrap it up by mentioning, like, with culture, it's the app teams who are the heroes, right? Not the FinOps team. FinOps team is there to empower others to do FinOps, right? And I think gamifying it, making it a little bit more fun. One of the organizations that I work with, they launched FinOps Madness, just like March Madness, to really ask thoughtful questions to their teams. There was prices announced for those questions, survey results, and as the survey prompts the team to look at their Looker dashboard, to look at their spending patterns, to look at anomalies and cost optimization opportunities that they have in their app, and really answer those survey. At the end of the day, again, they're winning gift cards and pizza parties and so on and so forth. But really, the idea here is to make it more fun and get that executive buy-in. Because if your leaders care about this, guess what? Your teams care about this. Guess what? This becomes a thing in your performance review. And I think it comes back to like ensuring that your team members, you get them promoted. You get them promoted, you get that culture right. Like that FinOps became a mainstream culture thing. Like it's more of a habit than one more thing that people now have to do.
I think I so agree to that point. And in fact, I was talking to Ben last week. Last week? Yeah, it was last week, right? Ben just moved to GitLab, and I was talking about like, hey, how do you think about this whole trend about shift FinOps left and proactive measuring? He was like, I think we should do all of it. One more thing that we should do is shift FinOps up, right? Once the leadership starts understanding the importance of FinOps, I think your 50% of your job is done. And we were just discussing about how do we make this cost conscious culture? How do we make this all day? Like, you solve shift FinOps up, I think you solved most of the problems. And I was like, wow, that's very interesting, right? And I think you are very well talking about the same thing, right? Yes, the app teams are hero, FinOps teams are there to enable. But if your leaders actually think it's valuable, it automatically becomes valuable across organizations. Yeah.
Exactly. And then that's the thing, right? Like then your cost became a key metric in the engineering process as you design, build, push into
Deploy.
production and deploy and monitor. And this is right alongside performance, security, reliability, right? Like that's not one more thing that team does. Well, it's something that you inherently just do. And when that happens, you have truly created that FinOps culture.
I think one thing I learned very good from one of the engineering leaders I met a couple of months back is in their definition of done, right, that their team does, they have one additional point. Yes, we have estimated all the cloud costs and we know it is going to be well within the budget that we have planned. And I think that was just magical because now everyone is forced to think about it and just write it down, right? And when you look at your sprint, you actually know, oh, wow, okay, we have this thing, right? It becomes a good data point, right, for teams to improve on it. The goal is not to blame, as you said, right? It has to be blameless, but to understand, hey, this is what we thought was, this is what happened, right? And so we improve on it. Right. I think we are also on the top of our, and before we go, I always ask this favorite question, right? What's your advice on the people starting on their career in FinOps? But I think this time I'm going to ask something different because a lot of people told me, hey, we have heard a lot about it, but we are already in this journey of being a FinOps practitioner, being a cloud economist. What's the future that looks like for me, right? So I think for all the listeners, yes, we are changing the question this time. I'll go back to my original question, but we'll hear from Pathik, right? What do you think about where is cloud economics going, right? What is the future of FinOps practitioners? What is the future of cloud economists? And what it would look like in 2-3 years, according to you? Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like we need to have some futuristic Back to the Future music playing in the background on this one. But I think
editor, please do that. Yes.
When we really think about cloud economics overall, I think we shift from paying for resources to paying for outcomes, right? And if you think about this in terms of, let's take an example of car ownership, right? Like we buy a car, we pay for gas, we pay for maintenance, we pay for insurance. But then there are also options like ride sharing, right? And subscription services. So you are not just paying for a car, you are paying for mobility as a service. And I think we are seeing a similar shift in the cloud as well, where it's moving from a model where we pay for servers and storage to specific model that help us get to that specific business outcome, right? And that's what you will see from an AI model perspective. And I think this is where unit economics becomes so much important because now you are focusing more and more towards the value that you drive for your own customers versus, the servers and the storage and things of those things and how you pay, right? So now you're moving from cost per storage, cost per gigabyte of volume. Well, now it's more about cost per transactions, right? What's my cost per active user? And how does it really drive the revenue, the customer experience, and so on and so forth. I think that would be the really big shift. Apart from that, like some of the themes that I've heard from FinOps hacks last week, FinOps is becoming bigger, right? FinOps for SaaS, FinOps for AI, FinOps for data centers, right? FinOps is getting larger and larger into the technology domain. Sustainability definitely is top of mind. Carbon reporting and how does that merge into the FinOps? I think we'll definitely see more interest there. And I think autonomous FinOps using AI, right? Like AI really becoming and taking that heavy lifting, freeing up more time to focus on strategic initiatives and driving that culture change. I think that's what humans do the best is humans. This is all a human field where it's again coming back to using AI for data and recommendations, but really using FinOps practitioners to drive those strategic initiatives and driving that culture change.
Agreed. I think this is exactly what I wanted to listen. This was like music to my ears, right? I think this, especially this part, right, where FinOps is not just meant for cloud, but also going for applications, right? SaaS, anyway, right? AI, FinOps, for AI. And I think this is going to totally change the way how we look at our job titles today, right? The way how we look at our job title. Oh, yeah, everything about Google Cloud. Yeah, this is a guy to ask all the questions. But I think as we specialize further and further, I think the industry just widens, like. So, yeah, very well point taken. Yeah.
It's going to be a fun ride.
Agreed. Yeah, buckle up. Right, exactly. And thank you, Pathik, right? This was great having a chat with you, right? And first of all, thanks for being very candid with all the answers and very open. I think this is what we were looking for, right? And I think our listeners would surely enjoy this entire thing. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So once
Appreciate
again,
you inviting me to this podcast. I enjoyed the thoughtful questions, and yeah, absolutely looking forward to having more discussions.
thank you, Pathik.